Okay, so this is Mounce chapter 19 here. Mounce 19. And it has to do with the future active and middle indicative tenses. I put here deponent in parentheses. Mounce we'll call some of these forms that he talks about deponent, and I'll refer to them as middle or middle only. All right? So let's start with how to form the future active indicative. Remember, future is an issue of timing. Something happens, the verbal action, if it's future, is going to happen after the speaker utters the statement. I will eat more chicken. Okay? The eating of more chicken will happen sometime after my saying that, right? Active means the subject does what? Performs the verbal action. And indicative is the mood of assertion. Okay? So we're going to be making statements of fact, as it were, about what will happen. So basics as to formation. All verbs, as you know, have a stem. And the stem that we've been using has been the present stem, but here we're going to use the future active stem for the future active indicative. All right. Sometimes this future active stem will be identical to the present stem that you already know, and sometimes it's going to be different, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in chapter 20. Now, the next thing that is attached after we have the future active stem is what Mounce calls a tense formative. Sometimes I will use the term morpheme for this, not morphine, although you guys might all think you'll want some morphine right now after a long day of studying Greek. A morpheme is a linguistic term for the smallest meaningful unit of a word. Think, for example, of the word cat, okay? I can't really subdivide that word into any constituent parts. That's the smallest meaning-bearing form of that word, isn't it? And it actually refers to an awful creature. And then if I add that to the word cat, I actually now have two parts of that word that have some meaning. Cat, and the S is a grammatical morpheme. Cat is a lexical morpheme. What does the S on cat tell me? That there's more than one of them, okay? So there's two meaning-bearing constituents or parts of that word. So a morpheme in linguistics is something that constitutes part of the word that has adds something meaningful to it. Here, the sigma is adding the notion of future tense, okay? That's a morpheme or a tense formative using Mounce's term. The connecting or the thematic vowel are the good old friends that we've already met, omicron and epsilon, and the same rules apply. If my personal ending begins with mu or nu, use omicron, use epsilon everywhere else. And then the personal endings are the primary active personal endings when it's future active indicative. Why am I using the primary endings? Because it's not past tense. It's not secondary. Okay? All right. So we use lucimen as our example here to just show you the different constituent parts of a future active indicative form. Lu is my future active stem. Happens to be same as the present stem. Sigma is my tense formative for future tense. Connecting vowels omicron. And here I've used the first person plural personal ending men in the primary active personal ending forms. And what does that mean? How will I translate that? We will or shall loose. Okay? You know the so-called rule for when you use will versus shall in proper grammatical style? You're supposed to use shall for the first person forms and will for the second and third persons. So I shall do something, you will do something, he will do something, we shall do something, y'all will, they will. Okay? That distinction has all but disappeared in the English language now. But if you want to impress your grammar teachers from grade school, you should do that, okay? Nowadays, we use shall with you. You shall clean your room, young man. And we use it with an imperatival sense, don't we? You shall take a bath. All right. So here's the formation. Again, our future active stem is lu in all our persons. Tense formative, sigma. Connecting vowels, omicron before moos, epsilons everywhere else. And then remember, when we learned the present tense, we had these modifications happen. And all the same modifications happen in the future. So, for all intents and purposes, when all is said and done, the resultant endings will be the same as the present active indicative, except the sigma will be right before the connecting vowel and the personal endings. And then lu will go in front of that. Luso, luces, luce. Okay? The sigma is the key. That is absolutely right. So let's read the forms. Ready? Luso. And we're going to translate this with the simple future form, I will loose, not I will be loosing. Okay? There's nothing progressive about the future's tense form here. We're just going to use the basic undefined simple kind of translation value. So I will loose, I shall loose. Luces, everybody? Luces. You will loose, luce. Luce. He, she, or it will loose, loosemen. We will loose, lucete. Y'all will loose, lususin. They will loose. All right? So the future is not too difficult. Your future is bright. Yay. Okay, now this next section I call variations on a theme. What we're doing here is we're still going to be adding the sigma for the future tense, but there are some situations that merit some discussions in a couple of varieties of types of stems that we're adding that sigma to. So the first one are stems that end with stop consonants. Remember the square of stops. I've put it up here for you on my screen here. Remember, labials are P, beta, phi. Velars, kappa, gamma, chi. Dentals, tau, delta, theta. What did we learn about these stops? When I add a sigma to them, they become the combination consonants psi, if it's a labial plus a sigma. Velars plus a sigma become xi. Dentals plus sigma. What happens there? Yes, the dentals fall out before the sigma. Remember, in Greek, the teeth fall out. Dentals are teeth. Consonants formed with the teeth. Okay? So you can see that this is going to be a problem when we're adding a sigma to a verb whose future active stem ends with a stop consonant. Blepo uses blep for its stem. I'm going to add a sigma and then the first person singular ending. Blep so is not going to have the sigma visible, is it? You're going to see it in blepso like this. I will see. You're going to have to move backwards when you're parsing because you're usually thinking, if I see a sigma, it's future. But now you got to ask yourself, do you hear a sigma, even if you can't see it, right? In other words, blepso is a result of a sigma plus some labial. And to find the lexical form, you sometimes, if you can't remember your vocabulary words, you might have to go backwards and say, well, what are my labials? This could be blepo, blebo, or bleffo. Which one of those is a verb I've learned? Well, which one is? Blepo, right? You haven't learned a blebo or a bleffo. Okay, graph. So, for I will write, using graph as our future stem, notice the phi sigma have to combine to become psi as well. So, grapso is how I would write I will write. Agso becomes oxo. Oxo, I will lead. Deoxo, kappa sigma becomes deoxo. I will persecute. Baptid so. Okay, so here's the deal. you learned baptizo as your lexical form, right? So the present stem is baptids. How do you find the present stem? Drop the omega from the lexical form and you've got the present stem. Here, the future stem is not baptids. It's actually a slight variation. It's baptid with the delta. That's a stop. Add a sigma to it and the teeth, the dentals fall out, and the future is baptizo. Baptizo. I will baptize. Yes, that's right. And then paith is to persuade. That's the stem we're going to use for the future. Paith so. Thetas before sigma fall out as well, don't they? And I'm left with peso. So when I'm bartering, I say in Mexico, I will persuade you with a peso. Yes, peso. I will persuade. All right, so those are the stems that end with a stop consonant. When we make them future, we have to watch for these square of stop issues, right? Now, we also have contract vowels that could end the verbal stem in the future. And when I have a contract vowel, something a little bit different than what you might expect is going to happen. And this is going to be true not just for the future, but for any verbs that use a tense formative or a tense morpheme. Here we're using sigma. I'm going to add the sigma after the contract vowel. So just to go ahead and preview this, agapao is my contract verb, right? I'm going to use agapa as my stem for the future, agapa. And it's to this that I add the sigma for the future tense and then my omega. But there's one change that happens here. The contract vowel, before I add the sigma tense formative, contract vowels lengthen. Okay? And here's how they lengthen. Alpha contracts and epsilon contract vowels lengthen to eta. They both do the same thing. Omicrons lengthen to omega. Okay? So agapa plus the sigma becomes agapeso. Agapeso. I will love. Poieso, the epsilon, lengthens to eta as well. Poieso. Play-ra-o. Play-ra plus sigma becomes play-ro. So, I will fill. So, you'll always have a lengthened contract vowel before that sigma future tense formative. Okay, so agapaso over here has to become agapeso. All right. Great. Let's talk about future middle, or as Mounce might call some of them, our deponent here, indicative. These are easy once we've grasped the future active because we're doing the same thing, only we're using a different set of personal endings. So for the future tense in the middle, we're going to use the future active stem. That is to say, there's not a separate future middle stem. The future active and the future middle are using the same future active stem. Okay? The tense formative is also sigma. The connecting vowel is also omicron epsilon. That's all old hat to you. The personal endings are the primary middle passive personal endings, the ones on the bottom left-hand quadrant of your personal endings chart. So using Luo here, here is an example of the four parts of the future middle. Future active stem, lu, tense formative sigma, connecting vowel, omicron before the mu of the first person plural, metha. All right, and I'm using the primary middle passive personal endings here for this. Now, how would Mounce translate a form like this? We will or shall loose. And the first year grammarians kind of stock way of translating a middle is to say for ourselves. It's not the best, but it's kind of a code way of saying I'm trying to give this middle semantics here. We will loose for ourselves. That is to say, we're loosing it, and there's some way in which we are involved in the results of that action. Okay? Now, why am I doing that? Why am I not translating this as we will be loosed? What is this tense called? This tense is called the future middle indicative. We're not calling this the future middle passive indicative. Why? Because the future passive is formed in a different way than the future middle. There is a different way to form the future passive. So in the present, the middle and passive are identical. In the future, the middle is different in form from the future passive. Okay? So we'll get to that in some later chapters. So this is a verb that has an active form and then also has a middle form. And so its middle form might have some slightly different nuance than its active form, but in both cases, the subject's performing the action, right? There's just in some way some more involvement that the subject has in the results of the action too. All right, and that's why, just sort of as a stock, standard, conventionalized way of translating the middle, many first-year grammar textbooks translate this as we will do something for ourselves. He will do something for himself. Again, it's not perfect, but it helps students to know that you're looking at a middle form with middle meaning. Okay, so when you put it all together, lu, sa, connecting vowel, and then the maisaitai methastentai endings, you get what's almost identical to your present middle passives, except you've got that sigma hanging out, and that second person singular is going to be naughty again. All right? You're going to get that eta with the eta subscript. So let's just read the forms here real quickly. Lusamai, luse, lusatai, lusamatha, lusaste, lusantai. And then peruamai would look like this in the future. Perusamai, peruse, perusatai, perusamatha, perusaste, and perusantai. All right. So you translate that as I will go or proceed. You will go. He, she, it will go.
I will go. So that I will go myself?
No. So this is a situation where the middle form is going to be translated with a kind of active meaning, right? This is a middle only form. Okay. Yep. So just I will go. I will go.
So on the previous chart, those all on resultant endings that I think is a trick. Maybe a typo. The second.
Oh, yes. There is an extra tau here. Thank you. We need to scratch that out. Yes. Great. Thank you for catching that. I had not noticed that, so good job. All right, excellent. Good.